They were planning their wedding until God called them to religious life, a priest and religious sister. Before discovering their vocations, Father Javier Oliveira and Sister Marie de la Sagesse were engaged and planning their wedding, but God had other plans. If you met them today, you'd never imagine there was a connection between a priest in Argentina and a religious sister in southern France. But years ago, Father Javier Oliveira and Sister Marie de la Sagesse were actually engaged to be married. Father Javier and Sister Marie grew up in Catholic families in the same social circle, so they were friends as children. By the time they went off to university, however, they had not seen each other in several years, and their lives had taken very different directions. While Trinidad was devoutly practicing her faith, Javier had fallen away from his faith completely. Father Javier recalled how he had just returned from a backpacking trip when he began a discussion with his childhood friend about church teachings he considered archaic and arbitrary, specifically the prohibition on premarital sex. To his surprise, Trinidad did not agree with him, but instead explained her beliefs so well that he was impressed. "I met a woman who knew how to defend what she believed," he said, "and who was also intelligent." Before long, he had fallen in love with Trinidad, and not just with her, but with the church itself, thanks to her influence. From the beginning, an unusual intellectual depth and dedication to seeking truth characterized their relationship. Soon after that conversation, they began dating. At that time, both of them were studying law. "We tried to take advantage of cultural life through music, literature, and philosophy," Father Javier said. "We read books together. We went out for coffee. We had a group of friends with whom we attended the conferences of Argentine Catholic authors. Meanwhile, God worked through Trinidad and the love she and Javier shared to bring him closer to the church. I started to practice the faith, to pray, to go to Mass on Sundays. All in large part thanks to her, to God mainly, but to her as an instrument," said Father Javier. He recalled how they cultivated a life of piety, finding time to pray the rosary together, and frequently receiving the Eucharist. Javier and Trinidad were engaged to be married when both were 21. They decided to get married after their graduation, which was 2.5 years away, and began making plans for their future life together. Their lives changed abruptly, however, when Trinidad's older brother announced his decision to enter the seminary. Despite their own serious faith, the news came as a shock to Javier and Trinidad. They drove her brother to the seminary, and on the way home, they had an important conversation. "When we came back, we talked about how crazy this was, that her brother left everything behind, the possibility of having a family, a very important career. We began to ask ourselves, what would happen if God called us to religious life?" Father Javier said, "The first thing we said was no, and that it was crazy, because we were in a beautiful relationship and we were already buying things to get married. Once the idea of entering religious life took hold of them, however, both Javier and Trinidad found they could not shake it. Before long, they confided in each other that they were each separately considering the possibility. They spent the next 2 years discerning with the help of a wise spiritual advisor where God was calling them. Or as Father Javier said, "There was this constant thought in my soul about what would happen if God called me. If I had to leave everything, why not be a priest? How to know if the best way to get to heaven for me is the priestly life or the married life? Where can I do the most good?" For her part, Sister Marie said, "It was a long period of discernment, at least 2 years, until God clearly showed me the consecrated life, and I could not doubt that He was asking of me this total surrender. At last, the call to religious life became undeniable for both of them. Father Javier became a priest and eventually a university professor. Sister Marie, meanwhile, belongs to the congregation of the Sisters of the Merciful Jesus in the south of France